Just before we get started on this, Ann's just made me aware of the fact that there are a number of members from the Planning Commission are here, which I'm very happy to see. However, there is a quorum of the Planning Commissioners here. And, you know, my feeling when I set up this meeting was to have a discussion amongst the commissioners to bring out the commissioners' visions for the city going forward as the CDP is, with the focus on the CDP. It wasn't so much to have a joint meeting to go back and forth. It was more of, you know, our putting out the commissioners' visions, personal visions, and thoughts about the CDP going forward and the focus of the CDP. And then having people in the audience from the public, if they had any specific questions on what the commissioners were thinking about. I wasn't thinking as much about back and forth with the Planning Commission and commissioners as much as the commissioners and the public. So I'm not, you know, Ann will, it's kind of a quandary here that if we, I guess if we just have it as a discussion of the commissioners and open to public questions for the typical 2 to 3 minutes, I don't know that that would constitute a specific official meeting of the Planning Commission.
I mean, as long as, you know, that you're here to listen to the commissioners and to take notes, you know, something that you can bring back to your own group, I really don't, I don't see a problem with that. I don't know if the chair has any recommendation, but I know, you know, you're here to listen.
Yeah.
Right.
We actually have talked with Glenn about this several times, and the question came up. I got the impression that if we were present, but just listened, that it did not constitute a quorum.
Okay.
Now, one of us may, as a private citizen, might say something, but in general, I don't think you're going to find the Planning Commission wants to engage in conversation. We're here to listen.
And that's exactly why I wanted to call the meeting this way, but I just didn't realize that you'd have such a good show up. So thank you all for being here. So with that, we'll just move forward, and it's duly noted that we spoke about it. And as I said before, one of the reason I called this meeting was to have the commissioners have the opportunity. I know we'll have a couple of joint meetings. We already have had one, and I know the Planning Commission has many months of work to do going forward before they actually present the commissioners with a 2020 CDP draft late next year. And so, you know, this was more of opportunity for each of the commissioners to take a long, hard look at the CDP from 2010, the review in 2015, some of the new data that you've actually passed along to us that you all are going through for this, the present CDP, and to be able to bring out our ideas of, you know, what our thoughts are for the future of Rehoboth as we look at the CDP. And so I asked each of the commissioners to take a look at that, and they have done that, so thank you very much. With that, what I'd like to do is I'll just go out and give you my points of view about what I've thought about. And again, what I've done is used the present and past CDPs as kind of a foundation of a place to start and looking at what's been done, what needs to be done, and, you know, what can be done as we look at the future. So what I'd like to do is I'll go off and then, you know, call in each of the commissioners to go down the line of their points of view, and then actually open it for discussion amongst the commissioners, and then if there are any questions from the audience at that point. So I'd like to save questions for the audience until after everybody's had the opportunity to have their say. And I'm just going to pretty much read the draft I put together, and it's in the packet, and I think it's available on the website of mine. And, you know, I see the vision of this for myself for the city of Rehoboth, not so much a focus on what has been done in the past, but focus on what is possible for the future with positive stewardship and guidance in order to protect and enhance our quality of life here in Rehoboth. There is a quote from the 2010 CDP which says Rehoboth Beach is a year-round, full-service community with seasonal tourism as its major industry. Tourism has become the year-round engine that drives the economics of our community. 10 years ago to today, even tourism is a lot different. Our shoulder seasons are getting longer and longer, and more people are coming and investing in the community as well as, coming just as visitors. So things change. Using the guidelines of the CDP, first looked at water resources. One of my thoughts is continuous maintenance and upgrades of our 2 lakes. Promotion of a positive health and protection of these natural assets. I think that's something we have to continue to do. We've been doing a good job, but new things are on the horizon, I think. Promote the canal usage as a resource for recreation as well as transportation. Enhancement, maintenance, upgrades, management plan for the city stormwater system and outfalls to the lakes and the ocean. Work with the federal and state agencies to provide continued beach replenishment maintenance cycle. We have that coming up this coming fall. I think they're going for the bid sometime in July with the hope that the project starts sometime in the fall on that. But there should also be a consideration of the possible future of funding through the city. Right now, we do get funds from the state and from the federal government, but at some point in time, those 2 agencies may ask us to put up some money, so that's something that we should probably start to think about for the future. Parks and landscapes. Plant and maintain street trees and shrubbery in all public parks and recreation areas. I think our arborist is doing a great job throughout the city to do more and more plantings of street-type trees, and I think that's something that we should continue to focus on. Update the tree ordinance to promote planting and protection of trees on public property and encourage planting and protection of trees on private property through innovative, equitable ordinance and incentives. And right now, the tree ordinance is being worked on by the ordinance committee to present something hopefully in the near future to the commissioners. Continued revitalization of park and recreation areas and facilities throughout the city. We've got some beautiful parks, and I think they all need maintenance as is normal, but I think these are great assets for the city and the community as a whole. Develop plans within zoning code to provide incentives to establish better use of green, environmentally sound technology in the construction and rehabilitation of structures within the city. I think that's very important as we go forward with all the construction that has been going on and will be going on in the future. Pedestrians, bicycles, mopeds, automobile traffic within the city. Right now, the city is working on the development of a new innovative wayfinding signage throughout the city in coordination with the state and other surrounding communities. I think promotion of areas and activities through enhanced signage will only help the community as a whole as we move forward. Utilize simple directional applications to direct pedestrian, bicycle, and automotive traffic. We already have a bicycle map of the city. I think that needs to be updated, as well as little signage for the bicycle and the pedestrian around the city. Be a pretty simple process. Continued updating and upgrading of parking technology to provide enhancements and efficiencies of the parking process. Right now, we're in a pilot program. We just put in, I believe, 46 new kiosks, new technology for parking, and I think that will take us into the future. Provide thorough analysis of street space throughout the city to potentially increase the number of parking on streets. It's something that we've mentioned, the parking committee has mentioned, and I think that's something that we can probably create maybe as many as 100 new spaces for parking within the city just by changing the way we park. Consider the potential use for large central parking transit hub to alleviate some of the persistent parking issues. We have had an outside vendor give us a proposal for the possibility of a parking garage here at City Hall that may add as many as 200 new spaces, and I think that's something worth at least looking at from a financial and a future perspective. Consider parking, possible zoning changes to promote more off-street parking in residential neighborhoods. I know that's come up a lot in the past, and I think it probably needs to come up again as we look at our zoning code. In the Rehoboth built environment, I'd suggest to encourage the creative development of selected properties on Rehoboth Avenue and other commercial areas. That's a quote from the 2010 CDP, by the way. I would suggest encouraging economic development projects that are presently in the pipeline. I think there are 3 to 5 that are very worthwhile projects, and I think that's something that we should think about, and especially given the fact that these projects are in areas that need to be revitalized, whether it's Wilmington Avenue, whether it's Baltimore Avenue, or at the western end of the city. Through analysis of city zoning code to update and enhance possibilities for other economic development and commercial codes, I think we do need to have a long, hard look at zoning code as well as our overall city code. I think that's been in the CDP in the past, and I think that's something to consider going forward. Consideration of enhancement of code to give consideration towards mixed use in the commercial areas. Again, something that's been in the CDP in the past, and I think now it's something to really look at, because what I would suggest that we do is encourage downtown living as they do in many communities that have changed over the years. Consideration of updating and analysis of residential zoning code to develop enhancements and incentives to residential construction and utilization of best building practices and creative development. Green technology, I think, is a big thing, as I mentioned before, but I think there are other incentives to help us along with the code. As far as the last thing, the infrastructure, development and implementation of a long-term maintenance and management program for the stormwater system. We've had some issues in the last couple of years, and I think that's a big thing that's going to be on our docket for the next 5 or 6 years. Continue process through capital improvement plan of long-term management and maintenance of city streets, boardwalk, and infrastructure, and the water infrastructure. Continue consideration of the possibility of a potential transition of the wastewater plant possibilities to the county. We are in the process of getting and finalizing possible new water and wastewater rates, and I think that's something that's coming in the next, hopefully the next few weeks. We'll have a presentation by the rate study, but the next step above and beyond that as we go into the next 4 or 5, maybe as many as 10 years, is consideration of what should be done as we move forward with all the work that we do have to do at the wastewater plant. Those are my thoughts. As far as the CDP in the past, I know a number of the things in the CDP have been done. Some of the things that are in the past CDP I have not mentioned, probably because things change. Things are a lot different, I think, in our community and in the last 10 years. And I think a lot of the things that we have to focus on could conceivably be in the CDP and just revive those things, but then there are other things, I think, that are more on the future. With that, I'm going to go down and by seniority as far as the commissioners go, because there's some commissioners that have been here longer. Commissioner Mills, you've been here the longest and seen the most number of CDPs and focus on it. And if your thoughts, please.
I may have the least to contribute, so you may want to do that in reverse order. Thank you, because I think I have a little different take on everybody. Everybody submitted, I think most everybody submitted documents, and if you go online, yeah, you question whether they were online, and I believe they are. These documents are embedded in today's agenda. But frankly, I participate a little reluctantly today in this. Why? When the mayor first presented this concept, I went back to him and asked him, would you please articulate what you want for this? And in his letter to us, he had kind of two themes. One is that the commissioner should have input in the production process. And I agree with that. But I believe that that should have been part of a joint meeting so that we can have that conversation like we can't have today about that. So that's one thing. But the other part of his articulation is that we would present our visions. And again, I'm a little reluctant on that because I believe that the Planning Commission did a very good job of managing past CDPs and workshops and charrettes and all that. And I believe that my input and my visions ought to become part of the Planning Commission's lobbying and soliciting of information rather than coming after the fact. So I feel like we are sticking our fingers into the Planning Commission's business and that it has the potential to inhibit future public input, or conversely, it might seek more agreement by the public. But I want the independent thought there. So again, I'm just not real comfortable for this. The other thing is, to me, this is a Planning Commission product. And I don't know whether this is trying to get the commissioners' thoughts out there so that we encourage you or subliminally tell you to make sure you include these things in there, because I look at the very last thing of the mayor has, continued consideration of the possibility of a potential transition of the wastewater treatment plant. I don't want you all intimidated. The past process, the Planning Commission has had these charrettes. They've done their public solicitation, and then they have been the ones that determine what gets put in here. So that particular thing may or may not get in there. So anyhow, I'm a little cautious. Having said that, I'll contribute some today, and that is that if you recall, or this board will recall, that during the budget talks last year, January 18th, 2019, I submitted a vision, goals, and priorities because we did the similar exercise back then. And so rather than start from scratch, I found a paper document. I can't find the electronic document, but maybe we can scan this and we'll put it embedded in the agenda. And it has my visions, goals, and principles. And basically it had to do with, and I'm not going to go over them right now. I'm going to make you read them shortly so that we can abbreviate this meeting a little bit. But a lot of it has to do with clean, safe, health-friendly, the Chamber of Commerce's motto. I guess in the briefest form, some of my visions or where I want to see the city go are things that I've already articulated for many years. And they haven't had support or haven't been able to champion it further for whatever reason. But the Wilmington-Baltimore streetscape been very high on my list. And if you recall, I presented twice in front of this board, and we didn't have any success advancing it. So maybe with the new board, and we'll have that chance to do that. The other thing very important to me that I've expressed over the past years is stormwater management and water quality, the health of our water bodies, all our water bodies, not just the ocean and the two lakes, but also the canal. Very important to me. I know that I wanted personally to work on the stormwater management program and possibly a tax to come out of that to help pay for our infrastructure programs. But the city said that they're working on it, and I don't know what the status report of that is, whether they're active or not, but I would encourage them to remain active in that. So Wilmington, Baltimore streetscapes, stormwater management, water quality health, zoning code review. And I've said before, zoning code review by an outside agency. I don't think any of us are capable in here. I'm not capable of doing it. I think an outside agency has to be funded, researched, hired to do this, and with the understanding that it could be, it's definitely going to be a multi-year program. Maybe it's going to be a 5-year program to do it, but I think we need to start on it sooner than later. The other thing is, I don't know how to categorize this, protection of our aesthetic. Jay Legree called it protection of our brand when it comes to the boardwalk. That on the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, we've always been very concerned about boogering up our image and putting too many things up there and whizzes and feather flags and all these weird things up there that we need to protect it. And I believe the same thing for the entire town, that we need to protect our image. And that includes, of course, our signage. It includes these feather flags that seem to be cropping up that I think are illegal, but they're still cropping up in town for some reason. And these wireless towers, which we are working on. So I think that's very important to continue. The other thing is largely articulated in my paper that you'll see is maintenance, 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 maintenance. How many times have I referred to that maintenance over the years, including doing a slideshow 2 years ago at the budget session? I presented a slideshow on maintenance and the need for maintenance. And this last budget year, I merely handed out the same paper with the same slideshow without having to stand up there and do everything because it was a repeat performance. So I'm hoping that we can do extra maintenance this year and schedule extra maintenance for future years. So where am I going with some of this? For me, the CDP has morphed into and beyond what a CDP document's supposed to be. It's morphed into something that contains every little minutia of how to run the city. For me, the CDP is supposed to articulate visions and goals relative to future capacity and growth, land use things, land use items that rezoning, for instance, that has to happen by law within 18 months after adoption. Actually, consideration must take place within 18 months. It doesn't have to be adopted because adoption is up to the voters. But then within the CDP, we've also got what I call operational items. The current CDP has for the pedestrian crosswalks up here. You've got those little buttons you push so that the little band shines up there and it counts down the clock. When those were first installed, the buttons, you had buttons side by side, and you didn't know whether this button went to that one or this button went to that one. So within the CDP, it said you shall put plastic arrows on those buttons to identify which one. Now, that's operational. That's not in the CDP. CDP is something, again, for land use, for development. It's something that goes in front of the state, and the state approves the CDP. I don't believe we want those operational things in there. So I'm suggesting that when we have that joint meeting, I'm going to be giving the same spiel if I'm still around. At that time, and that I hope you all consider that it needs to be broken down into two things. And again, you don't want the state having to vote and approve on these arrows. Now there is a little nuance there. Now, and Pat's going to get to hers. One of her things is putting solar panels on Convention Hall and City Hall. Great idea. But is that a CDP item? Or is that a operational item? I look at it as an operational item where we have a separate list. We choose how to do it or not. But if it were rewritten such that it was written such as incentivize and promote the use of green infrastructure throughout town, put that in the zoning code somehow, then yeah, that might well be a CDP item. So it's all how maybe you approach some of these things. So I'm very serious in that I believe the CDP is written absolutely very well as an overall document. But to perform as a CDP like I envision it, it needs to be condensed and only has those certain items in there and then have a separate operational component to it. I think that we need to reevaluate how we approach the CDP and these operational topics to advance everything methodically. So now I'm talking about 2 different booklets, I guess, or however they're organized. I think we need to consider how to advance these things in terms of assigning tasks to them. In the past, all we've ever done is had somebody champion things. It's just been volunteer. I champion this and that, and Pat's champion things, and that's the way things get done. But there's never been any organized methodology for how to approach these things. And I think I'm hopeful this year that will come to fruition. Assign tasks, perhaps. It could be the commissioners assign tasks to the city manager to assign them to different departments to do studies or whatever, or a commissioner could assign themselves to a task, or we'd assign the planning commission or another committee to something. Create individual analysis sheets or something might be a concept to investigate, such as our 5-year capital improvement program. If you haven't seen it, you need to take a look at it. It's wonderful. It's got individual pages. You know, if it says we will buy a new tandem 38,000-gallon trash truck, then there's a page in there that says what year it's planned to be funded, what the description of the truck is, and any other details. Maybe we need to do that same thing for selected items within the CDP or the operational manual, including such thing as, is there a study needed to implement this thing? What are the funding requirements? What are the permitting requirements? Do we need to change legislation? Apply all that to the little arrows on the push buttons, and you don't need much of any of that at all. You know, you just kind of do it, you know. But for some of these other things like Wilmington, Baltimore streetscape that are significant capital expenditures, I would think you would need to start with a study and engineering and et cetera. So if we maybe organize them, maybe there's a greater likelihood of them coming to fruition. Prioritization is something that we've never done either. We've never really organized these things. And I would say that this year, let's make that a priority of the planning committee. That could be that the planning commission does their own prioritization and then presents that to the Board of Commissioners and they do their own prioritization. I think that's legitimate. But somehow that needs to be done. And you could even get the public to prioritize these things by, through your surveys. But that, to me, is very important, especially at budget time, because these things have to be funded. Most everything has to be funded. Lastly, somebody, Paul, I don't know, it was Mayor, was in your sheet, or somebody said, we don't want to look backwards. Well, I think looking backwards can be helpful sometimes. But I think it's very valuable, this, David, your document, I think you created here, and the Planning Commission created an update status. I would hope that does land in the appendix as an updated thing, because I think it is worthwhile to see that, yes, things have been done, things have been accomplished, and we can pat ourselves on the back once in a while, everything like that. So that's my spiel for today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sharp, you're the next one in line.
The next victim.
There you go.
Well, I think I have a couple of large themes to offer. And as an outgoing commissioner, I've turned my attention really to what's really my expectation as a homeowner, a taxpayer, and an interested party in our community. And two things rise to the top, and they really are, the first one is revitalization and redevelopment of our commercial as well as residential areas, which begs the question, how do we want to navigate through that? Whether it's through incentives, whether it's through some zoning changes. We talk about these words a lot, but I honestly, not a criticism, just an observation, I don't feel, or I think I could feel better in the future, that there are tangible things that we've done to make that revitalization and redevelopment turn into what we want. It sometimes feels to me that it's happening to us as opposed to our being able to envision or orchestrate some parameters around it that actually deliver what it is that we want in the future. And the other thing that I wanted to just spend a minute talking about, in preparation for this meeting, I asked a few folks about if they could distill more what they mean when they say the character of our city. What does that mean? And I have a list of a few words. And folks would say, I can drill that down to it's a more unique experience. It's, in some instances, an iconic experience. In some, it's historic. In some, it's kitschy. In some, it's cottage-like. And a few folks said it's a spirit of nostalgia. So what I'm looking for going forward is being able to, and I'm going to use that term, preserve our character, but understand that it's going to be done with new projects, a new look forward. So that's what I'm looking for. And the second big thing for me, and I think Commissioner Mills already touched on it, is an initiative that many, many communities have, and ours would be called Rehoboth Beach Goes Green. And it's everything. It's how we think about all of our energy structure, our energy costs, and yes, a tactical project might be solar. But to me, that's a tactic of delivering a Rehoboth Goes Green. I watched something recently on how Ocean City, because there's so many communities that have already done this. We don't have to recreate the wheel. How Ocean City has been looking at and has been very effective in almost taking apart how their community works, how their city works, and changing things that over time are going to bring that city into Ocean City Goes Green. So at the same time, I thought we may have a huge opportunity here when you talk and think about all the assets, Mayor, that you just clarified some of them, which are our parks and our green infrastructure that already exists. How are we going to actually think differently and do things differently and make changes that are tangible for the community? So those are the two things. It's redevelopment, revitalization, and Rehoboth Goes Green.
I can go to the next, either the longer serving commissioner that had many more years of commissioner service, or the longest elected, either Lisa or Pat.
Go ahead, Pat. You talk very strategically. You go first.
Okay.
I defer to your longevity.
There you go.
And I mean that in terms of being a commissioner.
Okay, thank you. So in my vision statement, I have a lot of items that are sort of action items, are sort of more tactical. And what Commissioner Mills said really was very appropriate in terms of the CDP and the vision of the CDP and how sometimes there are things in there that are really action items that maybe don't belong there. But I do agree with him, and this is something that back after the 2010 CDP came to fruition, we didn't have a plan to implement anything. And I remember saying, okay, we've got the CDP, we've approved it, okay, I'm gonna take items 1, 5, and 7. And I tried to get other people to do the same, and there just wasn't something there to make it happen. And I think that's so important, and that's what's gonna really make a difference in how we move forward. And so if it's 2 documents or, one is for the state to approve, but the other one really should be our roadmap of what we do. So I'll talk a little bit about what, to me, are important things. And as far as reacting to what my fellow commissioners have just said, I couldn't, agree more with the whole idea of a go green, or environmental types of things that we want to do to push forward. And so there are tactical things. There are things like solar. There are things like rain gardens. And it is going to be incentives that's going to drive these things, I believe. I believe that if we, and I'll talk a little bit about mixed use, but if we have companies who come in or developers who come in and perhaps use a mixed-use building, give them an incentive to do a green roof. That's going to help us as far as stormwater, rain gardens for homeowners. Could we incentivize homeowners to do rain gardens? I mean, that would help with some of the stormwater maintenance. So, a lot of people have grass. It makes more sense not to have grass because of the chemicals and so forth that go on the grass and then end up in our lakes. So there's all kinds of things we can do, and I'd like to see just a special roadmap for the Go Green, because I think that would be really important. The idea of the character of the town, my look at the town is we have to embrace what I think is an eclectic image. And it's just what Tony said. It's a little bit of historic, it's a little bit of kitschy, it's a little bit of, there's just all kinds of things. And somehow we want to pull that together. And I look at the couple of restaurants in this case that have come into town, and one is Egg, that took a building that was the old McQuay's Market and made it into something really nice. Then I'd look at Rise Up Coffee and took a 7-Eleven and made it unique and really interesting. Those are the kinds of things that I think, we'd like to see, the creative redevelopment of the downtown. I think that is really something that is going to be very important as we move forward. So as far as, I've talked a little bit about stormwater management, but we do need a plan for that. And I think the beach replenishment is going to be something that is, we need to, I think, put together a reserve fund for it. How we end up funding that, I'm not sure how we need to fund it, but I think we need to really pay attention to it, because it could creep up on us and really just cause a huge problem in terms of our capital improvement plan, because that could be our capital improvement plan for 1 year. It's the cost of beach replenishment is staggering. It really is. But lately, within what I've seen the past year or 2 years is we've been really good about going out for grants for things, and I applaud the city manager with doing that. And if we can continue to do that for federal funding, and state funding for dredging, for whatever we can do, we should definitely pay attention to that, because there's been a big change over time. I'd even say 5 years ago to now, the amount of grants that we've gotten, and I want to see that continue. The parks and landscapes, Yeah, we definitely need to just maintain our parks. That goes without saying. That's been mentioned already. The street trees, plant more when we need them, make sure we do that. But the other thing is, and I'll read this part, update and implement a tree ordinance that is sensible for residents who mostly reside in homes of lots that are 5,000 square feet. Well, my lot's smaller than that.
Or
and
less.
Yeah, right. And putting an oak tree on my yard doesn't make sense. I mean, it just doesn't. Over time, I mean, it'll be beautiful for me for, 10 years, but 30 years from now, it's going to overtake the house. So we need to think about that. I love trees. I bet I have, I don't know, 15 trees on my property, and my lot is 50 by 84. So trees are important, but I don't have oak trees because it wouldn't be appropriate for my lot. And I think that's the way we need to start thinking about the tree ordinance, and that's something I've talked about in the past, and I hope people take that to heart who are working on that tree ordinance. The idea of a circulator, I've talked about this, public transportation, a bus in town that would really go through the neighborhoods and allow people to, who either can't walk, don't want to walk, have a way to get around. We're trying to keep the people from, and I don't want to blame anybody who lives on Rodney or lives on, out farther who may drive, We'd like them to do something different than drive into town, into a parking space, into downtown. I would hope that the circulator would be something that people would want to look to use. Let's see. This is very tactical, but I think we need to require that all trash receptacles be screened on commercial areas. It's just been, I know, a bugaboo of yours. It's certainly been a problem recently. Let's see. I'm not reading all of these. You all have my document, but I just want to cover some things that I think are important. This has been talked about by a lot of people over time about mini hotels. And I don't think anybody in this room probably is thrilled by the idea of, 8 bedrooms and 8 bath houses on your street that is a revolving door of people. And this is, again, tactical, but I'm mentioning it anyway. We maybe have to consider an increased tax on those types of properties to try to maintain some of the character so we don't end up into being nothing but a town with a bunch of large houses that are rentals. So, a couple of miscellaneous things. I do believe we need to continue talking to Sussex County for the operation of our wastewater treatment plant. There's ways that we can work with them that I think is going to really benefit our citizens here, our residents, and property owners. And I think we need to continue talking. And another, you may not know, probably don't know, that we participate with the Association of Coastal Towns. And it's really important that we continue that because we're talking about sea level rise and what that can do to our town. And it's so critical. And this group of coastal towns with the consultants are, I think, being really helpful in terms of really trying to understand and what we need to do in terms of moving forward. So anyway, that's sort of highlights of my longer document, and thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Lisa?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, everybody. I learned a lot just listening to my colleagues here. And I want to go back to Stan's comment first. What are we trying to achieve here? And You know, when I think about, and I've been in high-performing organizations, you know, the planning process consists typically of something, you know, of objectives, goals, strategies, initiatives, and measures. So when I think about the CDP, I think of it being our strategic document that really lays out our objectives and what we want to be in our town at a very kind of high level. And perhaps our goals as well, which is how you actually get to achieving the objectives. And the goals include your financial and link to the budget and some of your operational projects as well. And everybody in the Planning Commission knows this, but I'm kind of just going through my thought process. I think probably our job too here, and what I tried to do was look at strategies, maybe goals, strategies, and the initiatives, and the measures that we would use to track whether we are meeting the objectives out of the CDP. So that's how I looked at this exercise, is that there's a strategy that's put out in the CDP, and I used the current update of the CDP to start kind of my thinking, and then kind of go down from there. So I think it is appropriate to go through this exercise every year because we have to link, you know, our budget to the overall objectives and goals that are laid out. So it's important to go through how we're going to achieve those goals and how they're going to be reflected in the budget. So with that being said, I did a couple things just to inform the CDP process, for what it's worth, you know, and laid out what I see as the vision. A couple key points there. We have moved from the nation's summer capital to obviously a year-round beach destination. I mean, that's a fact. That's a fact. We're not going to go backwards. That's where we are today. We do need to define culture because we're in the midst of transitioning to a new character for our town. You know, and that's why I think the mayor said a couple times, maybe it's not worth to keep looking backwards because time and people and everything else has forced us to move forward to a new character, and that's not a bad thing. It's change, but it's not a bad thing. So some of if I look at just kind of take what was done in the CDP and look at the goals and strategies that I would like to see us focus on based on feedback I've gotten from the community. One is, I think, important that we continue to build a culture of transparency, inclusiveness, service excellence, and hospitality. And what does that mean, and what are some of the specific initiatives? I think we have to continue to make it easier, and the city manager and her team have done this, but easier to do business with the city. And I think two specific initiatives we need to take on there are to look at our ordinances and the associated processes, and streamline them and continue to improve them. And one of the things we've started there is an administrative remedies policy, or maybe an ordinance. We're still working on that. That will help make it easier to do business, whether you're a property owner, resident, or business, make it easier to do business with clear, concise objectives with the city. So that's one initiative. I want to continue to develop and post our financial reports and relevant communications. I don't know if anybody, you know, really, I hope people are looking at the great work on these financial reports. When I talk about transparency, that's what I'm talking about. You can actually go to the website and see reports from the city manager on exactly where our budget's going, how we got to a budgeted project, and where we are in accomplishing what we said we were going to do in the budget. That's all online. To me, that's transparency and openness in government and accountability. You can see every project in the CIP and see where we are in accomplishing that. So that's measuring what we're doing and showing how we're implementing. So I encourage that. It's really good, excellent work. But I think we always have to improve. And one of the things I've been a big proponent of is an initiative to create really a citizen survey to see what people think. I mean, I can sit up here and say what I think about our services and reports and budget, et cetera, but until we get a quantitative feedback from our citizens and track that and give reports out on what the citizens are saying, I'm not sure how we can really improve our services. So that's another initiative that I see as important. The second area is create and maintain a sustainable model to enhance our economic vitality or maintain our economic vitality. you know, I think as we're going through the next budget process, I think we have to look at stabilizing these revenue increases. We made some big increases this year. Maybe we need to stabilize and manage to this new budget, the new revenue, before we increase budget. Another thing that I think goes unnoticed is the CIP reports online. You know, we're completing ahead of schedule and below budget. Ahead of schedule and below budget, most of the CIP projects. Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what I'm reading in the reports. That's a really big deal. I mean, that the city's operating that way. So I want to just continue to focus on that. In terms of specific areas that I'd like to see included in future CIPs or continued, stormwater systems, like my colleagues, parks, bikes, parks, lakes, tree maintenance, beach boardwalk, paving, beautification, and what I'll call 5G implementation, so more strategic implementation of technology to give us different services. Right now, technology-wise, we only basically have Xfinity in town, and with 5G, we can actually start to bring in other new technology for our residents, our businesses, and other technology-type services. So I want to see us focus on that. I really am supportive of the Canal Access Dock project. I really hope we get that implemented this year. One of the things my committees, I chair the bandstand committee, and our convention center is really, I don't know how many folks have been there for a recent show, but we're getting some amazing acts there, and it's just amazing. So I want to continue to make sure that that is maintained and upgraded to be a very viable community asset going forward. So we may need some investment there. The next one is I do think we need a longer-term strategy for traffic management and parking, looking at and convening a public-private partnership to look at parking, a potential parking garage or facility, as well as using technology. There's apps right now would be one of the things I'd like us to focus on, where you can actually, from your mobile phone, see where there's available parking as you're coming into town. So that'll start to alleviate that congestion coming in. I think that's something that we have the opportunity to build. I think we should also, really focus on our core community assets and shift ownership for assets that we own that maybe aren't in our best interest to own. And that's on our agenda, I think, the 10th. So we own tons of property in town. Do we really need to continue to own residential properties in town, the city? I don't know. It's something we need to talk about and again, focus. Finally, I think that our city does a really good job with a lot of with our delivery of services. But again, if you don't continuously improve, you go backwards. So I think it'd be really important to conduct a process improvement initiative. Maybe working with University of Delaware or another academic institution to look at our processes and see where we can streamline them. For example, you still have to go into the city with paper and to get your non-transferable parking permits. There are ways to connect to the state, the state to see who actually has a registered vehicle. And we could actually probably do that online going forward. So, and cut that process down a lot and make it easier for those of us that live here. So, but that's just my observation. There's 100 other things, and there may be reasons we're not doing that. But it seems we could undertake a process improvement, project and look across the board on how we can do those type of things and use, digital services more. And then finally, I already mentioned using technology as a strategic enabler. That's another big thing on my plate. So those are kind of the strategies and specific initiatives that I would like to have us look at as we move into this budget season, specifically, and use what's already done in the CDP, but then keep informing the CDP based on what we're learning here. So, thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Commissioner Byrne.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see all of you out on a Monday morning showing interest in comprehensive development plan. Who would have thought? And in how many small communities of our size across the country would turn out this number of people on a Monday morning to have really a keen interest in this process? The good news is there's a lot of common themes running through what you're hearing this morning. I guess the other side of that is that it gets a little duplicative and perhaps not as exciting as you get down to our more junior members in terms of term. I thought when you said seniority, you were going to go to the old guy first, Paul, but it's the other way. So let me comment on things and try to say a few things just a bit differently and to be cognizant of the time. For me, it's somewhat of a misnomer to talk about sharing our visions, because the truth is what we're sharing are mission statements. Technically, a vision is kind of the where you eventually way out want to be, where you're always striving to be. For a lot of organizations, not a city, but a lot of organizations, if you ever really achieve that vision, it's probably time to go out of business because it's done. For a city, obviously, that can't happen, but a vision is always pulling you forward. It's always giving you an opportunity to set mission statements, strategic kinds of directions, goals, strategies, and so on. And so, mission statements, and this probably gets a little academic, but this, is a bit of my background, is that, the mission statements that we're really talking about communicate what the city should do, why we do it, and who we should serve. And so that's what we're really talking about. The other thing that's important in my initial comments here is to the Planning Commission. I think that this, and I hope the Planning Commission views this as a wonderful opportunity to inform your process, because I respect the process that the Planning Commission is going through. And I think for this to really be a process and an exercise that has meaning and that will not sit on a shelf, but will be kind of a working roadmap, as somebody said, we need to continue to find these points of intersection where we communicate. And this is one way to do it. Hopefully there'll be even some more kinds of interaction as the months go forward. And so, it's not meant, from my point of view, for my comments to be all-inclusive, but simply to kind of trigger some thoughts, some ideas, some critique as this whole process moves ahead. For me, the comprehensive development plan should be the driver of most, not all, but most of what city does over the next 5 to 10 years. And so if that drives everything from budget development and so on, then I think we end up with something that we can be very, very proud of and that will have a lot of meaning for us. So I think the comprehensive development plan has the most meaning if it really becomes what I call a shared vision, a shared plan, that it truly is shared by the residents, the resident HOAs, the business community, the business owners and business managers, the investors in this city, the visitors to this city. And so that becomes a very intentional process. It's not just gathering a lot of information and kind of being futuristic. It means developing truly a shared plan that people feel empowered by. People see themselves in it. Will you see yourself in this plan? If you're part of an HOA, a big one or a little one, will they see themselves in it? If you're a business owner or a business manager, will you see yourself in that? If you're a visitor to town, right, a regular one or just a couple of weekends a year, will it have any meaning for you? And to try to achieve that is the challenge, but I think we have to hold that up for us. I think the focus needs to be on a plan that will enhance the quality of life for all the sectors, the residents, businesses, and the visitors. I think we have to agree that we are a full-time, full-service, year-round community. A couple of people in their papers referenced the Ed McMahon urban study work, that to really look out so that we're still a thriving, prosperous go-to place in a decade, that we need to be and continue to strive to be a unique sense of place. Those words are often used. That's another way of protecting our brand, I suppose, or protecting our image. But, not just the image that was, but, where do we want that image and brand to be in the future? So it's still a unique sense. So people want to invest in, live in, shop in, et cetera, Rehoboth Beach a decade from now, and not one of the many other communities competing with us. So some big picture kinds of things, because it's very easy to get down into the weeds and start talking about specific strategies and who will do what and when will we do it, and that'll all happen in time, but I think we're still on the calendar at a point where we need to look at big picture things. So I think we need to develop design standards for green infrastructure. There's a variety of ways, a variety of verbiage to use on that, and we're all using it in different ways. A number of communities have grabbed onto the terms of wanting to become a blue-green city. And that means bringing water management, all areas of water management and green infrastructure together. I think we need to look at the science that's out there and what's doable and realistic and kind of goal-oriented for Rehoboth Beach. I think we need to be developing design standards for all building and development, including streetscapes that would adhere to such standards of conservation landscaping, blue-green city, et cetera. We need to invest in and enhance the beauty and environmental sustainability of our public areas. I mean, that means everything from the small little things of the vegetation and the planters that are around town, more importantly, to more permeable pavement and surfaces, to enhanced recycling efforts, recycle where we're not, enhance what we're already doing, preserving and growing our urban forests, strengthening policies and practices to protect and preserve and maintain our lakes and work with our partners, state and county partners, to do that. Policy is critical, and so we can't forget that even though we are a city, we're a part of a county and a state that does develop policy that overall will set a standard and make a difference. We want to be a partner, a verbal and active partner in the development of those policies. I think we need to really take a look at establishing a stronger mixed-use zone category to encourage development and redevelopment, and very creative redevelopment of our commercial areas. I don't think it's realistic to talk about just workforce housing downtown, because we're never going to have housing for more minimum wage people. That's not realistic in our downtown, I don't think. But it may be very realistic to be able to attract more middle management folks to live downtown that are active in our business community, that are working downtown every day. I think we need to strengthen alternative means for people to move around the city. And again, we can get into the weeds and into the strategies, but that certainly means bikes, scooters, and very importantly, a viable shuttle service or a circulator kind of a service that can serve everyone. And importantly, was that a signal, David, for us? Okay.
You decide.
All right, I'm almost done, David. But particularly a circulator that will help move visitors and employees around without more automobile traffic. I think create a facelift to the commercial areas of Wilmington and Baltimore Avenue. Investing in that has been mentioned. I think that's critical for our future. Continuing to work with the Canal Park area and, with the goals of how do we better connect our city with Lewis and Dewey, and to do that in a way that can be sustained for many, many years ahead. Upgrades to technology. I think one of the things that we need to look at is as we upgrade technology, would it make sense to provide citywide Wi-Fi as a utility for all of us? A number of communities have done that. Many big cities have done that. Is it viable to do it in a smaller community like ours? I think we need to look at, can we do that and do it in a way that will be capable of delivering 5G in the future, the direction that all of this is going. We also need to look at, the pillars or the links of technology that the commercial entities want to put up. How do we do that in ways that will not detract from the natural environment, but if anything, either be hidden or add to the so-called environment in positive ways. And then, last but not least, I think we need to become more and more serious about this. How do we prepare and plan for the various ways that climate change, some people now are calling it climate crisis, may impact our community and our surrounding area? That needs to, I think, be an important part of this CDP going forward into the next decade. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schiffer.
So I think that Commissioner Byrne kind of kicked things off at the end of his remarks by reference to last and least, and that would most likely potentially be me. And so anyhow, I thank you all for your participation today, or at least attending. And I guess what I'm encouraged by is that I moved here, my wife and I moved here on purpose to Rehoboth Beach because of its uniqueness and because of the sense of community that we see every day when we walk around the town. And I kind of viewed what we're doing today as an opportunity to maybe refine or better enable the conversation that we all should be having about where we are today and where we can potentially be in the future. So I don't think anybody should feel like what's being presented today is dictating in any way. It's, I think a lot of times communication is challenged. I think we as all communities have to grapple with is that change is inevitable, and we have an opportunity to be out in front of how that change happens, and that we're not reactive, but we're helping to kind of direct the change that we participate in and that we allow to happen here. And so I'm not going to spend any time kind of reiterating what has already been said, but I think that we all have an opportunity to look around and find ways where we can improve how we treat each other, how we treat the people who come into our town, and that if we take a more positive approach to what we do today and what we do in the future, I think a lot of things are possible. And I think we have an opportunity to influence change in a way that will keep people engaged, get more people engaged in the conversation, and also have better results as we go forward. So I think the conversations that we're having around being more ecologically friendly and recognizing that that we want to do less harm to the planet and to our community. So those things that we can do to help preserve the physical health and the environmental health are all going to be good things. I think that if we look for ways to better manage parking and traffic flow, that's a good thing. And I have some of the same points in the paper that I put together that you've heard from my colleagues up here. And I think ways that we can continue to embrace the unique opportunity we have as a small town to kind of preserve that great familiarity and intimacy as we build for the future, I think, are things that all of you as engaged and very bright people and our fellow residents and folks who run businesses and own property have an opportunity to do. And so I also believe that we have a very solid set of tools in place with the CDP that kind of leads to prioritization of specific identification and prioritization of specific projects that make their way into the CIP, where we can explore what the budget will bear. And so I think that a lot of the things we're already doing may just need some refinement to varying degrees. And so I just remain hopeful that we will continue to work together to collectively and individually make Rehoboth Beach a better place. And we've articulated some things today that are possibly part of the conversation on how we do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I open it up, if anybody's got any questions from the audience, any comments, questions from the commissioners about things that each of the commissioners have been saying?
You know, just one observation, Mayor, that as I was listening to everybody talking, and it's come up, I think, a couple of times, that maybe one of the gaps that we have in the way we're organized in our city, something to look at, might be this concept of an implementation team. Maybe there's a disconnect between all the work that goes in to the vision and the documents and so forth, and then actually making it real. Maybe there's some structural improvements that could be looked at going forward to see how that could happen more seamlessly than it does right now.
Can you take that a little bit further? I mean,
Well, I think Chair Mellon can attest to for about last 7 years, I've periodically gone to some of the Planning Commission meetings and talked about, to the previous chair as well, that it just seems like when something of a large nature is in the CDP, and then we have misgivings that we don't make any progress on it, just trying to think, what is it that, you know we want to make the progress, but we don't actually advance anything. So it's just an observation. I don't know if it's valid or not.
I think you're right.
I do
And
too.
you know
I
what
wanna
I
add on
think?
to that.
I think you
Yeah.
need a commissioner to champion these things. I think that's the way things get done. I think that one of us sitting up here has something that's top priority for them. And if they champion it and bring along the rest of the commissioners, then in fact, it may become something that will benefit.
Well, and that certainly may be a way to look at it, Pat, but in our current structure, I think about the committee structure. Because it sits where it does at the moment. But when I try to think about, is that committee structure really intended to be a quasi-implementation group? I don't know if it actually delivers what is hoped for. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I would
I mean, I think what Commissioner Calusi says is true, that, just as they do in Washington and any place else, it's like the CDP will come up with a list of things, and then maybe we start to look at it from a prioritization perspective and say, okay, maybe there's 15 things here, but maybe these top 5 can be in the next 3 years and the next 5. And then a commissioner kind of take the lead, the point, and maybe that commissioner is the one that leads the charge for green energy or, implementation of some kind of a green energy thing. And maybe gets the input of the committees as they are formed. Not the committees to be the one to take the charge, but the commissioner to champion, and the commissioner, unfortunately, to do the work of, go in that direction. Because if they are the champion, I would imagine if any of the commissioners feel like, okay, this is my, I like this, I want to go after this, I would think they'd be the ones to step up and coordinate the activity.
I think a key to this is prioritization by this group.
Yes.
And that once you prioritize it, then if you have somebody that wants to champion something that's low on the list, that costs money, needs funding, then maybe we shouldn't be pursuing that. We should be pursuing some of the top priority items, so.
I agree
So
that
again, I think it comes
prioritization
down
is
to this
good.
group.
Yes, definitely.
I'm going to kind of add into that too, and it may be a different twist, but kind of, it's a little academic, but it actually, if we had a structure like this, it might help answer the question, right? So the CDP to me is a long-term document, right? It's 5 to 10 years out, isn't it? 10-year document. So that should just lay out kind of high-level objectives of where we want to be, and then it's our job to come up with kind of the specific measurable goals on how to get there, and the strategies that are more tactical on what initiatives we're actually going to invest in to meet those objectives and goals. So I think if that's all documented and laid out in a very clear line of sight, then it starts to be clear, a little bit clearer on how you track implementation, who's responsible for implementation. So if that's something we could think about in this process. So I don't see this discussion, overriding or supplanting the CDP process. This is taking what the CDP process has done and saying, here's how we're going to operationalize what's in the CDP and how we're going to link it to the budget so we actually get the projects done. I just wanted to clarify that, so.
Yeah, and I think that comes to what Commissioner Mills was saying about the prioritization of
Exactly.
it. It's, the CDP may be something that we handle over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
But we may find that, these 2 or 3 things, because this body feels like those are the ones to go after, we can get done in a year or 2
Yeah.
years. And so we can start forcing situations in there from a budgetary perspective. Because I think
Yeah.
what's gotten lost sometimes in the past is the Planning Commission has done a great job of putting together a CDP with all these visions of the public and put it in front of the commissioners, and then the commissioners have kind of put it on the shelf and really not prioritized it. It's like, when do we have to do this or whatever? Whereas, once we get it, I think probably the next day we should probably focus on, let's try to get as many things accomplished as we can over the next 10 years. And, how can we accomplish that sooner rather than later without having too many things on the plate?
And if you ascribe to my philosophy that the CDP ought to be independent of operational lists of tasks, then I think that lends itself to 2 priority processes, where the Board of Commissioners up here give the prioritize all the CDP items ultimately. But the operational things, I think, necessarily have to involve the city manager and her departments.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right, and I think, the other thing that I would add to that, because I think we already have the framework to get a lot of this done, as the mayor described and others, about the key role that the CDP plays in kind of providing the vision for the future based on, what's happened in the past. And then, as Commissioner Mills said, we have a opportunity to prioritize and start creating a little bit more clarity to what the future could actually be. And then that should provide a better information to the various committees who may naturally take some of these things on as priorities and come up with recommendations and other more detailed elements, and then it would come back to the Board of Commissioners for discussion and vote. So I think, and then ultimate execution would be by the city manager and her team. So I think that it, we may need some refinements, but it looks like we already have a pretty good framework in place to do all this.
And I was going to add that the CDP may well cause us to want to reorganize our committee structure to make sure that the committees stay relevant to what the new CDP is all about. I mean, at a minimum, going back to mission statements within the committees, but maybe entire committees even.
I agree with that.
Anybody in the public like to make a citizen comment? Please.
Jan Conacy, 42 Oak Avenue. I'm going to not focus on what I think the Planning Commission should do because, I've sent David some suggestions on some readings. But I will focus on a couple of things that I think the commission should be looking at long-term. And that is, and somebody's mentioned it before, I think it was Stan, one of the problems with our zoning code is, and from years on the Planning Commission, I can tell you that it's a mess, that our zoning code is that it's been done by volunteers and commissioners and not by experts. And I know I've shared with the mayor before, when Ed McMahon was here, and I was part of the group that brought Ed McMahon here. I have all of his, the slides are right on the website, but following it, the group that brought him here also did surveys, and we also did follow-up workshops. Sally Boswell from the Bays Committee led them for us. And we have all that data too, which we're going to share with the Planning Commission. But one of the things that Ed talked about was intention, that change in a city is intentional. And, we look at, for some of you who are new here, how did we get to be such a great restaurant town? Well, back in 91 or 92, we passed an ordinance that limited the size of restaurants to 5,000 square feet. And the intention was very clear. We did not want the Rusty Rudder in downtown Rehoboth, nor did we want to be a town of chains. We wanted to keep our unique restaurants, some of which were already here and many new ones have come. It was intentional. And frankly, it's lasted. I'm not thrilled about the changes that were made a couple of years ago, but it's kept our town. So people thought about, what do we want to look like? How do we want to grow? What do we want to be? We don't wait till somebody brings in a plan. But the zoning code needs to be professionally done. We've made changes through it over the years based on circumstances that were never thought of. But if the zoning code had been done by a professional group, then they would have been thought of. If we want to redo Wilmington, Baltimore seems like it's going to get redone by the hotel that's going to take up, half the block. Then groups like, and I had sent Paul some names, who Ed recommended, will do that. They will hold the meetings. And they then professionally will do the zoning code. There's all kinds of things, and Ed talked about them. They're all on the slides on the city website, form-based code, some of the innovative things that are going on in communities. We respond to problems. We see parking as a problem. Disney World puts up a sign that says closed when they're full. We don't have that option. But to change the town, because too many people come, just seems to be wrong. But I don't think we're intentional enough, and I do think that we as a city need guidance. Most of all, like Steve, we all chose to live here. Most people didn't move here because their job was here. We chose to live here, and we want to maintain our neighborhoods, and we want to maintain the trees, the boardwalk, the things that make Rehoboth special. And it is intentional work that gets it done, and it's intentional work that's done in coordination with professionals who know what they're doing. And I've seen, some of these groups, how they have over years, you adopt their zoning and their long-range plan, different, the implementation probably. And you can see how the mayor and the commissioners of these communities have, like, your CIP, your 5-year plan, where they say, okay, this is what's going to happen first. And they work down the line. I've seen it in West Palm Beach, dramatic changes that happen in neighborhoods as the money is there, but they're all operating off the plan that this group put together for them, and that includes the zoning. So anyway, I hope that as commissioners, you all will look at that and be very intentional about what you do. Because as Ed said, this can change. And it is changing. Some of our neighborhoods are changed beyond recognition. He talked about conservation, all kinds of things. But if you haven't looked at the slideshow, I strongly suggest you do. It's right on the website. And I will sending David all of the other material that goes along with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Jan.
Yes, hi, Sturgis Dodge, 512 Newcastle Street. I really want to echo, what Jan said, and mine is kind of related to that. And, what just occurred to me when I heard you talking about all these things was the competing needs that you were talking about. You want parking off of the street, but you want stormwater protection, you want to save the character, you want livability. All these things are fighting each other, because the unique character, you're talking about nostalgia and neighborhoods, and, you were talking about mini hotels, and, and are there room for oaks? Well, yeah, there's room for oaks. If the houses are smaller, there's room for oaks. And the truth is, and this is the ugly truth, and this is why having a comprehensive code rewriting makes sense, because the parts of the code fight with one another. Right now, trees fight houses, and houses win. So eventually, what you'll end up, you might have trees, but you're not going to have one tree taller than a house. So, that's where it's going. If we keep letting money control what our town looks like, that's what we're going to end up with not one tree above the height of a house. So our skyline high canopy will be gone unless there's some kind of catastrophic economic thing that ends the trend of development in this town. So, and to piecemeal go after the code and try to, tweak the tree code to make it more fair to people. The thing is, it's not going to be fair to trees, and it's not going to be fair to the entire town, and it's not going to be fair to the visitors that come here for the experience they want to have here. And to quote Ed McMahon, one of the quotes that stuck in my head, when people say, "What a beautiful town," what they're saying is, "What beautiful trees." Thank you.
Thank you.
Well put.
Thank you, Sturgis.
Anybody else, please?
Donna Mabry, 221 Hickman. I want to make a couple comments, and most importantly, I want to point out something that's been overlooked. It's not been mentioned by anyone. I don't even think it's in the Planning Commission's write-up. And I hope we don't keep overlooking it, because it is the factor that makes people most unhappy in their communities. The HUD did a research study. It was the one thing that came out that is most distressing to people and causes people to be most unhappy in their communities. And it's not mentioned. And I'm not surprised it's overlooked, because you don't see it. It's noise. In a study they did, the noise was the number one thing that made people unhappy in their community. And it had more of an impact than parking, traffic, or crime even. So that's critical. So I think when you're thinking about, green building techniques, I think you could also hire, again, professionals who could help you with noise mitigation, so that we could do some noise mitigation in construction, such as, just a few examples, like on porches, front porches, and that can be noisy. Well, if you have people you install some noise absorbing material on the ceilings or on the walls, that would help. Like we want alternative transportation, and people talk about mopeds and scooters. Well, some of those are extremely noisy. Do you ever hear some of the rental scooters? They're extremely noisy. And as we have more and more people coming to town, there's more development, we're going to have more and more congestion. But if we have noisier and noisier vehicles, that'll cause a problem. So I think there are electric scooters. So we could prioritize electric things. Yeah, so there's a variety of ways, simple ways even, but I think if you had a professional, they could guide you better on how to do that. But I think as we get busier and busier, we'll have more and more of an issue with this. And this is what makes people cranky. And I should mention, of course, with the pools. Like again, we know they're a source of noise and problem. So new pools in the future, if they had to include some kind of noise mitigating material or sound absorption. Okay, so that, but I just think don't, factor in the noise when you're looking at developing in the future. The other thing I'm hearing that is important is that a lot of your statements are really critical. You're talking about public buy-in. You're talking about everyone, being together, a shared vision, a unique small town that appeals to residents and businesses so they can thrive, a shared vision, quality of life for residents, businesses, visitors, informed and involved community. So I think that that's what you're talking about. You want people working together and coming together and buying into these plans. Everybody. It's not one or the other group. It's all of us. It's residents, it's businesses, it's visitors. So it's public cooperation. And I think, how do you convey that to people that their cares and that matter? And that's when you let people know you've heard it. You've heard them. Just like when you talk about many hotels are very problematic to people, that you've heard that. Or that you let the public know you let everybody know you hear their concerns and you're addressing them. You don't brush them aside. You don't poo-hoo them, which is often what happens when people complain. They get their problems get minimized, But it's important to let people know that you hear them. Now, and there's one point here where I think you may be setting yourselves up for a problem. You also want public input. Well, you've recently in January, you had a lot of public input. There was a town hall about the sewer, about giving the sewer over to the county. Well, 150 people showed up in early January, and I think every last one who spoke was against giving the sewer to the county. I didn't hear anybody speak in favor. Yet here on a lot of on your vision statement, you want to give the sewer to the county. And I think if you proceed, that's sort of like saying you didn't hear those 150 people in the town hall. I mean, I think that could be very problematic. And I don't know how you can get a clearer message from the public than when you have a town hall with 150 people all sharing the same idea. So I think every group that knows that their concerns are heard, buy into things. And I think the other important thing about Rehoboth, people talk about character, culture. I think the other thing is esprit. It's really the esprit and how we feel about things in town. And I know that when I moved to town, the thing that
Please finish.
the thing that struck me was everybody was happy to be here. I'd never been in a town where you talk with people and everybody was happy to be here. And one of my favorite signs for Rehoboth is, if you're lucky enough to be in Rehoboth, you're lucky enough. And that's how people felt. But that's slipping. That's slipping. I think it's slipping as there's more congestion, there's more noise, people aren't being heard. So we don't want to lose that. That's why you want to bring everybody into hear all of the public. And I have to make a plug that I really think residents are the heart of your city. They're the heart of your city, and your primary job as a commissioner is to provide services for the people who live here. That's what a town is all about, is providing services to people who live here. And it was so refreshing when Lorraine Zeller said that her priority was residents. And that was wonderful. But I'm not saying that to exclude others. It's not an either or thing. It's everybody you want to listen to. But I think residents are especially helpful in that they help with the hospitality. They're the heart of a town. They help make things happen. They buy into things. They're welcoming. They help set that esprit for visitors. And we know if it's not working for residents, likely it's not going to work for renters or visitors. We're kind of like the canaries in the mine shaft. If we're having problems, it's going to be problems for others. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Donna.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Charlie Garlow, 82 Sussex Street. I'm a relatively new resident, homeowner, permanent resident here. And let me tell you, wow, this is fun. Small town democracy in action. I hate to say cute because that implies somehow simple, because you all are very sharp, bright, occasionally brilliant, Commissioner Byrne, but it's fun to see this happening. And I'm pleased to sit here and learn about things. I had no idea that the comprehensive improvement plan was ahead of schedule and under budget. I've never had that happen to me in my life in any project I've been involved in. So I'm pleased with my town to be that way. There are many good success stories to say. My question for you would be, is there anyone thinking about having a climate action plan? Now, I know we have the CDP, we have the CIP. I'm asking if we've thought about a CAP. I mean, acronyms are fun, LBJ, JFK, et cetera. But the climate action plan, to my mind, would set goals and see if we're making progress towards meeting those goals. Not unlike, I hate to hesitate to suggest that Mayor Malley, former Governor O'Malley in Maryland, he had the city stats and the state stats, which were a way for people to graphically see whether or not we're making progress towards our goals. You all have talked about transparency and other ways of implementation of the things that we want to see happen. I'd be glad to see that happen here as well. I'm pleased to see so many people are interested in trees and climate crisis and other sorts of things. That's very much of interest to me. I'm glad to hear from Donna about noise, because I'd like to invite you to be part of the Electric Vehicle Association, of which I'm the president of the Delaware Electric Vehicle Association. That's DEVA, if you hadn't heard that acronym before. But that helps to reduce noise in our town. I think that I'm able to learn from everybody here, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
And Charlie, just the one thing on the climate action plan, that's something that ACT, which is the Association of Coastal Towns, the 7 coastal towns in Delaware, we meet once a month. That's something kind of we're moving towards in the future. Anybody else?
About one thing, just one thing. The legislature is going to hear, Representative Schwarzkopf told me he's bringing the lodging tax up on June 11th. And, no?
It's tomorrow, Wednesday.
Oh, he's changed it then.
Well, that's what I heard last week. He may have changed it over the weekend.
Okay. I got an email from him, and that's what he said he was doing. But the point is that it's going to pass before the end of the year, which then allows you all to pass the 3% lodging tax. That money could actually be put aside and used to fund a professional group to come in and do the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean.
Anybody else? Oh, please.
That's a good point.
I'm Jay LeGree. I live on Prospect Street. Former Commissioner Conacy is spot on. We really need to fix our codes, our ordinances. And she mentioned form code, which is really something we should be looking into. It starts out with deciding what you want, and not the way our code is now, deciding what we don't want. And they do it by transects. It's a great idea. Costs a lot of money. It's a big change, but we really need to do it. And so I want to echo that. I share Commissioner Mills' frustration with things coming and going, getting dropped off. You never see them again. You have start talking about things and then they disappear. And then for years, Commissioner Mills and Commissioner McGinnis and I tried to get the trash trucks off the boardwalk. We got consensus, we got positive responses, and the trash trucks never disappeared. And then one day last summer, we were walking on the boardwalk and the trash trucks were gone. It was a most wonderful thing. You can don't know how it happened, but it did, and it's great. And 50 years ago, when I joined the military, they used things called action items, and we should think about that. When the consensus is to have an action item on the agenda, it stays on the agenda until you either make a formal decision to take it off, the project is completed, and it either stays there or goes away, and you're looking at it every time you look at your agenda. That's a wonderful way to get things done. It's efficient, it works well, and we need to do that. When Commissioner Schlosser talked about stable revenue increases, that's the most important thing that was said today. We have to do that. We have to change our fees according to what it costs us to do that. We have to charge for water what it costs us to bring it to our customers. We got to change that. Smoothing is fine, but every year an incremental increase is what the rest of this world is doing, and we need to do that too because our cost of living goes up, salaries go up, cost of materials goes up, cost of energy is going up like 6% a year. And those guys that are out there pumping that wastewater plant, we're paying that money to do that, and we need to adjust our fees accordingly. And of course, everybody knows my pet project. One of the things that McMahon said in his book, I'm not sure he said it in the presentation he made or not, but many cities have made terrible mistakes by focusing on something right in front of them, and in obtaining that thing that they were focused on, they ended up giving the store away. And we must really be careful when we start giving away our wastewater system, because that is a cash cow down the road. Make it to 2030, we'll make it, but after that it's gravy. So we just need to form a partnership with the county and let us decide what gets pumped off the beach of Deauville and not somebody in Georgetown. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I chose this terrible time.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. And I just want to make sure we recognize that it was the city manager that, of course, that implemented removal of the large
Yes,
trash truck off
Yeah,
there.
I'm sorry. I've talked to Kevin since then, and I certainly love what you did.
Thank you. Anybody else, please?
Gary Glass, 105 Country Club Drive. Just real quickly, I think the three most important things that the commission and the Planning Commission needs to do is look at prioritizing the projects effectively and then spending time working through the top priority projects without spending a lot of time on the lower projects until they move up the list. Prioritization, I think, is really, really important. I also think citizen involvement is important. I think the committee structure provides citizen involvement. I think our citizenry has a lot to offer to the community. And it gets the community involved, and it makes the citizens a part of the process. This involvement has to be done with a variety of points of view. Right now, I think it's being done with a singular point of view. There's a lot of people in the community that have a lot of differing views, and it would be much better to air the subject out with all the points of view and look at all the issues. I think you would come out with a much better project. And on that subject, divisiveness in this community is not healthy for the community. I think the commission and everybody, the Planning Commission, should spend more time trying to build a consensus of the neighborhood so that changes made are for long term and not short term, so that the next people that get elected to the board change everything the previous commission did. Let's focus on things that we can all agree on. There's a lot of those. And let's work towards those goals. Let's stay away from the controversial issues and try to build a consensus so that we all feel like what's happening in our community is the best for our community. And I think that right now, too much attention is being applied to the business community, and not enough is being applied to the residential community. So I was glad to hear people say, let's look at ways that we can retain and improve our residential community and not commercialize it with these, quote, mini hotels. So those are the three suggestions I have. I hope that we can all work together and that we can try to bring the community together as a whole and not have one group getting control of the board and then doing what they want to do, and then next week another group gets control of the board. Let's try to all work together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Anybody else?
Okay.
If not, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.